Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of L&L Takes. I'm your host, Kyle Pitcher, and this is the podcast where we talk about indie movie making, production, and everything movies. Let's get into it.
Wait.
I was expecting you to say hi.
Hi.
I'm going to keep that in. Roll the title, the sequence. Welcome to the L&L Takes podcast, Leonidas Mears.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I watched the first episode and that was really cool. And when you asked if I wanted to come on, I was like, yes, this is awesome.
I'm so excited. I've been interested in interviewing outside of L&L. Obviously, first guest was Paxton.
Yeah.
Paxton Tran. Go check out that episode, the first episode of L&L Takes. But we interviewed him, talked about, The Demon of the Dance by My Side, his new movie that just came out today.
Mm-hmm.
His first time directing. This episode, I'm focused on outside experiences of L&L, trying to see what it is like doing film production, trying to get other people's perspectives, because that's kind of hard to come by these days with indie filmmaking.
Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of that around on the internet, seeing that perspective from really small indie creators.
Mm-hmm. I think first topic I want to dive right into is you recently have been directing a few Bananay films, unreleased yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to kind of hear, what is your experience with that, like going from being mostly on camera and focusing on that aspect of it to going behind the camera and seeing how to deal with actors, how to be stern but just when being a director, and implementing your ideas while still listening to others.
Yeah, I started out normally just acting in the Bananay movies. I was Hatchet in The Hunt 2. I played the unnamed dude with the mask in in The Great Movie War. And just recently, I was, not really recently anymore, I was the gang leader in Dead End.
Dead End, yeah.
That was the first time the first time I'd really gotten behind the camera was in The Great Movie War. Whenever, during the other team's scenes, I was the guy there because Kale was the one that was in those scenes. So I was the one that was recording it. I was doing track shots and stuff. And that's what I've really wanted to do this whole time. I always had the goal of being a filmmaker and film director, and I just entered into Bananay and automatically started out as an actor, and I'm fine with that. I really like acting. It's fun. It's very fun to play a specific character. But what I'd always shot for was trying to get behind the camera, trying to do things and making the movie.
For sure.
And recently, just today, actually, we filmed The Rotten Apple.
Rotten Apple, yeah.
And that's really one cut. So it was difficult getting all of the angles that I wanted to without making the camera moving around so quick unnatural. But it was pretty cool seeing all of the actors in front do their things, and I've been maneuvering around that the entire time.
I think with that, especially today, what I noticed is a big part of directing with one-shot take films is getting everybody to know exactly what they're doing, because with one-shot films, it's like giving everyone a task because everyone's doing everything at the same time because it's all in one shot. So it's very much, getting everyone to know exactly what's going on and what's being shot. And if someone messes up, it can ruin that entire take, which, we had a couple moments where that happened on set today, but mostly it was pretty solid and pretty stable. But yeah, no, I think with that, it's very much like you have to make sure everyone knows what's going on, because otherwise it can go wrong.
Yes, and that was a big deal, is a lot of the times in movies, occasionally somebody makes a joke or somebody does something that throws the scene off just to add it in as a blooper. We could not afford to do that with this movie. That was a no-go because the shots were going to be so long and there was going to be so much going on in every moment. So if you messed it up, that could have been a ruin. That's a ruining of that shot which took a lot of time and took a lot of effort. And that happened not as much as I thought it would today.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty cool. But yeah, it was difficult. I got up on a chair and shouted to everybody like, hey, no goofing around during this production because it's going to take a long time to redo this stuff. And that leads into the other part of your question that you asked me, how do I feel taking charge and doing things? The most difficult part of that would probably be communicating the vision. Thinking about like, okay, I specifically want this guy to come in this way, but it's real difficult to just say that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why probably for the next couple of movies I'm going to be making, I'm going to be getting into storyboarding. I'm going to really try and do that. I'm a decent artist, and I'll be trying to draw scenes the way they're supposed to be done.
Yeah.
And all the things like that, so that everybody's on the same page as to what they're doing in the foreground, midground, and background.
Mm-hmm. I think a tough part of it too, at least with, because this project and Dead End were both very, very collaborative projects with everyone's ideas were kind of contributing, and we all had a part in what the story became. And so when you have that, you have a lot of different visions of what's to come. I know there were a few times where it was like we spent time debating whether we should do it this way or this way because there was just that creative difference. So I'm excited to see your film coming up, Hardware with a Heart.
Oh yeah, that. Were we saying something?
Yeah, just to finish my thought. But your film, Hardware with a Heart, is going to be completely your own vision. You've created this story. You've put in the time and effort. So I'm excited to see what you do with that, with nobody inputting creatively on the story besides you.
Mm-hmm. Hardware with a Heart, I'm so excited to try and make. My dad came up with the idea a long time ago whenever I built my first Iron Man suit, and I was into movie making and all of that with a previous group, and I was in the car with him driving home from one of my jiu-jitsu classes, and we were trying to think of movie ideas, and he just like slaps me on the chest and says, you know what would be awesome? A bunch of kids fighting a 1950s style robot. And you could totally build one of those. I thought to myself, yeah, that'd be really cool. And then I proceeded to have that same thought, oh yeah, that'd be really cool, for about 3 years before now when I feel like I can actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
I could build the robot, and that's what I'm currently doing right now, along with writing the script for the movie and storyboarding it all out. It's going to be a giant, giant file. I have the treatment, the mini script of everything that's going to happen. I've planned out locations. I know where things are going to be happening. I've got everybody casted. I just need to write the full story down in a script. And I'm excited to do that. That's going to be awesome.
I think that's one of the things, as like indie movie makers, there is no like, there's nobody to tell you exactly what to do and when to do it, which makes it really difficult because, like you said, you have an idea that you're sitting on for so long because it seems unrealistic. It seems hard to do. I think the thing that I've realized most with L&L and Bananay Studios is we've made these groups, these spaces where that impossible feeling of like I could never make a movie because I don't have X amount of budget or I don't have that the quality things that I need and whatnot to make this, because you just go for it. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about indie filmmaking is people just going for what they want to do instead of sitting on ideas for years. But yeah, no, I think that's like one of the coolest parts. And so you mentioned before Bananay, you were part of another film group, correct?
Yes, I was. A long time ago, I was with a group of guys that were called Cool Films. It had a bunch of guys that were really into films like me, and we made a couple of really small, kind of dumb action movies. And I was in a part of another group called Light and Night Productions, and that I've kind of inherited over time. It was originally run by, say his name, Dwayne Johnson, at the school, and he really didn't do anything for it. the thing just started, and we were like, okay, we're all a part of Light and Night Productions and all of that. And then it never really went anywhere. Light and Night never made anything, and eventually it all faded out. And he officially gave the company to me, and I haven't done anything with it either. And I'm hoping to just as a tribute to it, try and add a Light and Night title card to Hardware with a Heart.
Gotcha.
Because that would be a nice tribute to one of the things that really got me into where I am today, of trying to lead everybody to do something.
That's interesting. I had no idea that Dwayne was really into film production types things.
Yeah, that was it was interesting. We were thinking about, oh, what's this with the titles? Like, what should we call it? Who's owner? Who does this? I came in and I'd had this painting on my wall that's of a lighthouse, and on one half of it is day and the other half is night. I made it with a bunch of chalk and with a crudely painted lighthouse in the middle. And that turned into the first logo of the production team. And we called it Light and Night because that rhymed.
Yeah.
But that fell through. We made dozens of posters for dozens of movies, like, oh, that'd be so cool to make. Oh, that would be so cool to make. But none of it ever really worked out. The Dead Desert, which is one of them we wanted to do, partially inspired me while I was helping write Dead End. It was a bunch of kids journey across the United States to try and get to a survivor haven all the way in California. And that recycled ideas really helped out in that sense. Light and Night really played a major role in me becoming an amateur filmmaker and joining Bananay to try and make movies like that, and it was really cool.
I think what's so interesting, and you brought up Dead End as like what you've come to after a lot of inspiration and you know, your journey through indie filmmaking, going from, you know, you're just saying ideas, you know, you're getting in that headspace, but you're never acting on it. For me, it was before Dead End, a little before Dead End. I had made, or not made, but I was acting in my first ever short film that like got published and got some attention, was the Poof short film.
Oh yeah.
And that was my first ever time being in a like a short film like that, and just seeing, you know, Rafael Quinta, he's the director for Poof, as well as the feature film that's coming out later this year. And he, you know, seeing him doing, you know, telling us where to go and you know, where like the camera angle he'll be at and everything. It was just, that's kind of the point where I realized not only do I love acting, but I also love the art form of movie making. This is a storytelling tool, not just something that you go and see at the cinema every once in a while. And like, that was really the turning point for me. And when we got into Dead End, I what I'll say about Dead End is I love the people behind it, and I love the ideas and story behind it, but I think the movie itself was just not where I wanted it to be.
Yeah, I see where you're talking about, especially the second day of filming.
For sure.
That was rushed. That was, okay, we gotta do this, and we were all dying by the end of it, especially you and me. Where I was wearing 3 layers of clothes and slowly turning into a raisin out in the sun, and your arms were gone from being tied behind your back the whole day. I think it would have really benefited from a third day of filming. It
really would have, yeah.
And we would have been able to add more character moments in the movie, make the characters much more interesting.
Have more dialogue.
Yes. We had only a handful of dialogue scenes that were just pure dialogue, where you really got to know the characters. And if we had included more of those, I feel like it would have been much better.
For sure. I think, and like with Dead End, it was so, like I said earlier, so many people's brains coming in to this one project, this one movie idea that we had just were like, okay, we want to make a zombie film, and we want to make a collaboration between L&L and Bananay, and so a zombie film seemed like a good idea. And with that, zombie movies are very, very you can bring so much to the table with them.
Yes.
And so there was just so much creative difference when making that storyline that it got kind of nuts.
Yeah, there's a near infinite amount of possibilities for a zombie movie, like you said. And so everybody's going to have their own idea that isn't exactly going to fit with the initial narrative. Like Night of the Living Dead wouldn't have the same types of scenes and characters and events as something like 28 Days Later would. Very different, very, very different. And Dead End was an example of that, where it would have absolutely benefited from straightforward, write it all down script. And that, I don't want to run into that ever again.
Yeah, I think that's like one thing. I don't know if I've told you directly, but I've told so many people from Lizard and Lobster that I think that film would have really benefited from a script. And later this year, I believe we put it in our announcement video, but Lizard and Lobster will be making a kind of vampire version of the movie. It'll be very different from Dead End, but it's going to be very inspired by the story of Dead End, where it's people trying to survive an overrun world and get to a safe haven. It's going to follow that skeleton, but I'm hoping with it I can do justice to what I wanted for Dead End that I wasn't able to get across with Dead End.
Yeah, you did a great job in Dead End. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
You did a great job as Henry, and that verge of being a human and a zombie. What movie are you necessarily referring to? Are you allowed to say it on the camera?
I believe we announced it, so I think it's fine. The movie is titled Of Shadows.
Of Shadows.
Yes. I don't know if it'll be coming out this year or next year, but hopefully some promotional material will be coming out around then. And while you're here, after we get the podcast filmed, I actually have a little preview of another movie that me and Jackson Shannon are working on. And it's called Behave, and it's about these teenagers going into an elementary school that's run down and old, and they get kidnapped by a cult who runs inside this elementary school that kidnaps children and tries to corrupt them.
Nice.
And they have to escape before they get brainwashed. But that's not, enough self-promotion. But all this just kind of wrap up the point of like Dead End, of where that was for me. Like it had so much potential, and I feel like that's why it kind of hurts to see the final product. Not that it was necessarily an editing problem or a script problem, but just a problem of we didn't know enough about what we were doing, and we didn't take enough time to prepare for what we were doing.
Yeah, we wrote the story in like 3 days on a Zoom call, Discord call thing. That's when we actually set up the official meeting ones.
That's so funny. Back when we used Zoom,
we had to because we didn't want to pay for it, so we had to
Yeah, every 45 minutes you'd have to make a new Zoom call.
Just had to. Oh crap! Everything would just cut out.
No, it's so funny because sometimes we would be in the middle of like a really important topic, and then it would just whoom, and then you'd be like, "No,
dang it!" Okay, and then you'd have to communicate, text each other. Okay, this is the code. This is the code. Go back on. Go back on. All of that.
It's such a hassle.
That was a mess until we did the Discord, and that made everything a whole lot easier.
For sure.
On the topic of Shadows, Behave, Dead End, movies like that really add on to another light of indie filmmaking, and that is horror movies.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
That right there, being scary does not have anything to do with budget. Like something.
Five Nights at Freddy's movie proves that.
But something like Skinamarink, which I don't know if you've ever seen that.
That is a beautiful movie.
You could literally film that thing at night in your house with any camera, with just audio and occasional scary images, and that is infinitely more scary than something like World War Z.
Yeah.
No, I'm not dogging on World War Z. I really like the movie, but it shows how much you can pull off with atmosphere, with just a camera, with just music, with just what you have available to you. that does not relate to giant amounts of spectacle. And that's why horror movies, I feel, are so popular with indie filmmaking, is because it's all storytelling and skill. Because the goal of a horror movie is to make you scared.
Yeah.
And there isn't any there isn't a way to deal with that problem by just throwing money at it. It's all about the skill, the time, the effort, and the way you do things.
For sure, yeah.
There's a reason that something like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is still so popular nowadays and such a cult classic, because it's scary. The freaking dinner scene in the movie, I felt sick while watching it. Like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, yeah. But that, I feel, is something that L&L and Bananay should really start getting into our heads. Is one of the things that indie filmmaking in the position we're in that's best for us is horror.
For sure. I definitely agree. I 100% want to at some point make a designated scary movie that is a first, like, because here's the thing. Dead End came around about Halloween, and it's kind of Halloween-y, but it's very vague with that genre, and I would not call it horror at all. It's a thriller, maybe.
It's an action thriller with some horror gore elements.
Yeah, but I don't think there's never a point in the movie where you're supposed to be scared. There's parts in the movie where you're supposed to be on the edge of your seat, but not scared.
And that's a thriller.
And so I am really excited to, at some point, like you said, venture into the horror genre and see what we can do with that. Speaking on like what you said, Skinamarink was this like really low budget indie movie, which was just incredible. I think with that comes what I think was an amazing part of. I'd put it in the indie movie making category, because it's kind of that homemade style. Is have you seen those videos on YouTube that are like old VHS, like old videos that would be like, watch out for this monster that comes out at night?
Analog horror.
Yeah, analog horror. Sorry, I forgot the name of it. But analog horror has been super inspiring for me with the horror genre. And I think that's, like, in my opinion, that's kind of where I see the start of very popular indie film production coming into the spotlight a little bit, is that analog horror.
Yes, that is definitely true. And given the fact that it almost costs nothing to make other than a good software, that you could just do all of this, make it look like it's a VHS tape, and boom, you put it out there and it's really creepy. All of that stuff is really, really creepy to see. In fact, I have this, I've been wanting to do one of those. I just need to learn how to do those editing. But I have been wanting to try and make an analog horror thing. And I feel like that'd be freaking awesome. If Bananay or L&L did one of those.
I think I'd be totally down to help you out with that, because I love... I've been actually getting really into the editing side recently. Like, I've been editing... I've edited very little, but from what I have edited, I've loved the process of... you've seen... I think the only thing you've seen that I've really edited was the intro sequence to The Gore Tide.
Yes.
But I'm super proud of how that looks. And, like, the fact that I was able to even put that together, because I didn't even know I could do something like that. And, it was just like it's just been something that I've kind of fallen in love with recently, has been editing. And analog horror, I've been watching since I was a little kid, which is probably not great, but you know.
Yeah, analog horror and that special kind of editing only really became possible now. And it could only be widely engaged with now with the internet and YouTube, and that's really why it became popular, is it's free horror. Because it's all on YouTube and it's all really good. And I would love to dip my toes into that if we can. I have this idea. But on the other topic of horror, what other horror things do you think you'd really like to be a part of when it comes to that?
So with horror, I definitely want... Okay, so like... There's a couple different kinds of horror films that I think kind of have their own genre, and like I think you have like slasher films, and I don't think there's anything wrong with a slasher film. I think a slasher film has its own beauty of this movie is meant for crazy kills. Like that is what the purpose of the movie is, and when a movie does it right, it can be really fun to watch. Like the Terrifier movies, for example. Those are slasher films. Those are movies where it's just characters dying, and that's kind of the point, is these crazy deaths. Um, and I think those are fun, but I don't think those are necessarily for me to be acting in. When I'm acting in a movie, I like to bring a lot of substance to my character and a lot of background and whatnot. And with those kind of films, well, I don't think there's like I'm not trying to limit anybody. I'm sure there's a slasher film you could make with those kind of characters in it, someday. But I think that it's a very much more difficult thing to get a lot of cool, interesting kills and have a lot of extensive background and deepness of characters. Sorry, I talk with my hands a lot.
Oh, that's fine.
But definitely with an indie film production, a horror movie, I definitely want it to be. While I do want a lot of physical horror, I also want psychological horror.
Yes.
I would love to do a psychological horror film. Is like one of the biggest things that I've wanted to do, and we're L&L is doing one later this year that I will be directing called Quintet.
Oh yes.
I'm gonna be directing that one. Rafe is writing the script for that. Rafael Quinta. We call him Rafe. But Rafe will be doing the script for that. I'm directing it and just doing a lot of the stuff for it. So I'm really excited because I haven't gotten to direct yet. And I love directing. Like I want to try it out so bad. But I just haven't gotten to yet.
It's fun. Actively seeing your vision, the thing you want to see, become a reality is really cool. Now that I've really dove headfirst into it today with the Rotten Apple, that it's a really cool experience.
I'm so excited for it. But yeah, that's just one of the examples of psychological horror films that are coming to L&L. But definitely would love to do a collaboration film with some psychological horror elements between L&L and Bananay.
On the topic of what you were saying about slashers, it reminded me of something my dad told me a long time ago. Whenever I was a part of Light and Night, one of the things Dwayne wanted to do was make a remake of the film Scream, which I mostly shot down virtually every time it came up because my argument was the movie's already been made.
Exactly, yeah.
We need to come up with something original to do. And when I was bringing this up to my dad, he also said that another thing is people are not going to want to see that because we were all kids at that time, and nobody wants to see kids get brutally murdered and stabbed and stuff. But recently, I was telling the same thing to my dad, and like, oh, horror movies, all of this. And then I thought to myself, well, people don't really like seeing kids get killed, remembering what he told me. But then he told me, oh, that doesn't apply to you anymore. You're a teenager, and all your friends are teenagers. Everybody loves seeing teenagers die.
That's true.
That's why slashers are so popular. And that stuck with me, like, oh, this is totally something we can do. And that's another thing that I've argued with the people of Bananay with a lot, and is that we're all a bunch of teenagers who are decent filmmakers, and a lot of us are really good actors. Meaning, we have an advantage that even big Hollywood doesn't, and that is really good teenage child actors. We can make a movie about teenagers and children that Hollywood would have a much harder time making because there's just not nearly as many good actors for those specific people out there just wandering about Hollywood. That's why if you find a good child actor like Haley Joel Osment or Macaulay Culkin, they go around everywhere. They make a ton of movies because this is reliable. This is good. You have a good actor.
It's hard to find, yeah.
Yes. So I've been really trying to steer us in the direction of making movies about kids and teenagers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because
same with L&L.
Turn our weakness into a strength. The weakness as in if we try to tell a story where we're playing adults.
like
it's not going to be nearly as believable.
yeah, like in the Hunt movies, for example,
Yes.
where a lot of the Bananay people talk about having kids and like being adults, and not to like when I criticize these like Bananay movies or L&L movies, I'm not trying to put any hate out there. I'm just trying to learn from mistakes. But with those, it's you kind of laugh to yourself because you're like, this kid looks 14 years old. How does he have a kid? You know. And I definitely agree with you that we need to play into the strength of having
we are child or teenage
actors.
actors that are really good, and that is an advantage we can do by telling stories that you couldn't really do any otherwise. Like, as Paxton brought up to me the other night when we were driving home from the Minecraft movie, one of the worst examples of that, it's either you have bad actors playing the children, unless you get real lucky and have a bunch of good actors, like in the movie Stand By Me, spectacular bunch, and something like Stranger Things, spectacular bunch, or you have adults playing teenagers.
Yeah.
And the thing that he specifically brought up was Riverdale, which I have not seen, but
I have not seen it either.
Apparently that's a major example of that. Of just, these are clearly adults trying to play high school.
Well, yeah, there's so many movies like that where they're adults playing high schoolers, like High School Musical, for example. That's just like one that came to the top of my head, but you can tell that everyone in that movie is above the age of 25.
Yeah, they're way older. And that also adds the layer of unbelievability to the movie. Like, these are not what teenagers look like. This is not what teenagers look like. All of that. But with our movies, we can do that. And that's one of the things I want to do with Hardware with a Heart, is the cast is going to be played by people that are of their age group. The main group is of a bunch of teenagers, high schoolers. And where there's adults required, there's going to be adults. Probably some of my family members, all of that jazz. But that's one of the goals, and I'm really curious to see how well it's going to transfer to the screen. If you make it look cinematic, you can do all of the color grading, you can add all of the black point, you can add all the contrast that you want to make it look the same as a Hollywood movie, but if it's going to be kids playing adults, it's not going to be realistic. But if you have kids playing kids and adults playing adults, then I really am curious to see how it'll feel, how professional and good it'll feel.
I definitely agree with that a ton. I think on that point of like, I think like turning our weaknesses into strengths, I think that a big thing that is interesting to me is whenever I watch a movie like Dead End, right? Obviously I see the passion and I see the love behind the film, but you see all these tiny little things that when put together make the movie worse. Like, you know, we had cameraman shadows, we had plot holes, we had you know, undeveloped characters. And you I feel like you can look at that and, you know, in the moment that's just something you brush off. Oh, my shadow is in the camera. That's fine. No one's gonna notice. Oh, you know, we didn't get enough dialogue scenes with the character. That's okay. The movie's gonna be great anyway. You brush off those tiny little things, but then when you post the film, you look back on it and you're seeing all those little things grouped into what is the film. And I think something that I've really noticed is just when you fine-tune those little things and you finally call them out and say, hey, we can't do that anymore. We need to make sure our shadow's not in the camera. We need to make sure that if a scene goes wrong, we redo it instead of just putting it out there anyway. When you fine-tune those things, you've upgraded your projects by like 20% because you've gotten rid of all those tiny little 1%, 2%, and overall it's increased the quality of your films. I think with Bananay, that's very obvious throughout the years of it. Because you, like, I don't know if you watched all the way through the last episode of the podcast, but I talk about the stages of Bananay. The phases. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. And how Dead End kind of made Phase 3 what it is because it finally was the movie that looked at those tiny little things and crushed them. While Dead End still has a ton of those tiny little things, it
put in more effort to get rid of them.
Yes. and it's so much better because of it compared to the Banana movies that came before.
Yeah.
It feels like an actual indie film compared to those movies. And so I think the next step in both Bananay and L&L is trying to see what we can do to take out those little things.
And adding onto that, you were talking about the phases of Bananay.
Mm-hmm.
You can really see as we've gone on, every movie that we've released it and like, oh my gosh, this was so awesome, that was so cool. And then a month or two later,
You look back on
you look
it.
back and it's like Captain America Civil War out there, like, that movie sucked, no, it was good. And all of that stuff. And the biggest example of that's probably The Hunt 2, where half of the group hates it and thinks it's terrible, and the other half thinks, oh yeah, that was pretty good. And that's what.
Where are you
one of the
at
things.
with that? I'm curious.
I'm on the side of it was pretty good for what we had. I mean, 2 days, the costumes were really good, and the story was at least coherent enough to follow.
Yeah.
But I don't look at it the same as I did when it first came out.
For sure.
Absolutely not. And virtually everything about it, like camera work, camera and shadows, things that really jar me or my scenes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I sucked in that movie.
I'd like whenever you look back on these things too, like looking back at Dead End, I'm like I consider myself a good actor.
You are.
Yes. I think I'm a good actor, but in Dead End, I feel like I sucked. And I don't think it was my fault because I played a character that had no memory without any script. And that's just a whole, it's so difficult to work with.
You played the conduit character. And whenever a conduit character, when a character is just completely blank, because what they're really supposed to be is a vassal for the audience.
Yes.
To learn about the world and all of these things. When you have them as the main character, that's always a problem because you can't really relate to the person very well at all.
Yeah.
A great example that immediately pops to mind of a conduit character would be that agent guy at the beginning of Hellboy. In the first Hellboy movie, you have the rookie agent as the main character, when in reality, we're all there for Hellboy. We're all there to see Liz, Ape Sapien, all those guys. And those are the main characters, not this conduit character guy that's just supposed to be a vessel for the audience. And you can immediately tell that because he's gone in the second movie. He's not there, that he's been transferred somewhere else. He was just a vessel for them to learn about the world that they live in, which is something that I think is done way too much in Hollywood. They underestimate what humans and people can relate to in movies.
I think that was a big thing for me with the Minecraft movie.
Yes.
Every character besides Jack Black was a conduit character.
Yes.
Everyone was supposed to be a vessel for the audience to learn about Minecraft through, which sucks because we already all know what Minecraft is. We wanted to see a story with it.
Yes.
And so that's what kind of was unfortunate for me with the Minecraft movie is like, we know what's going on already. We don't need to be taught what a flint and steel is. We need to be taught flint and steel. we need to be shown a story that we love and we root for. And so I agree with you. Hollywood thinks the audience is stupid, which sucks because the audience isn't stupid.
Yeah. And not only stupid, but the thing that really gets me is they think we can't relate to things that aren't human. Meaning, the best example of that, where conduit characters are completely unneeded, and you could just have a story with those guys, is Transformers. They always have these conduit characters, which I know there's going to be a lot of nostalgia that I'm going to be hurting when I say this, but like Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox's characters are boring as heck in those Transformers movies. Everybody is there to see Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Ultra Magnet, all those guys fighting and doing the things as Cybertronians and Transformers. That's what we're there to see, and that's what's cool. And the reason that those characters are there, the Shia LaBeouf's character, Megan Fox's character, and all those characters are there, is because the studio and the writers don't think we can relate to the Transformers.
Yeah.
when we can. I mean, how do you think the original G1 Transformers show went? The Transformers were the characters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the best Transformers live action media that was ever made is the opening scene of Bumblebee, where it's on Cybertron and it's all of the Transformers fighting and fleeing Cybertron.
Yeah.
That is the best live action media I've seen out of Transformers ever. It was so awesome, and it really showed what we're there to see. It was one of those moments where the movie gives you what you want to see, like, oh, you want to see this? You see this? No! You see this! Like, that's not what I wanted to see.
Yeah.
And that stems from the idea that we can't relate to the Transformers when we can. The times when you need conduit characters is for something like Godzilla, where the Godzilla is not a character.
Godzilla that's blending into the green
Oh
screen.
yeah, let's go.
Green screenzilla.
Yes, exactly. But you need conduit characters for Godzilla because Godzilla isn't a character.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a personality, he can't talk, he can't do anything.
It's a monster.
It's a monster, and that's the villain of the movie. And in situations like that, things can become unmemorable. Like, oh, this character, nobody remembers the character in the movie. Everyone remembers Godzilla because the character was boring. Therefore, the movie was also boring. The saving grace of some of the Transformers movies is the Transformers are still characters. You can still relate to them because even though the studio doesn't think you can, you still can, and you can still enjoy the characters. You still bond with the characters with ignoring the conduit characters. But something like Godzilla, you have to have good conduit characters. And that's something that Godzilla -1 did spectacularly. The conduit characters in that are really interesting and really good. And that's what made the movie really freaking good. That's my favorite Godzilla movie ever. It deserved all the praise it got and all the money it got.
I think, kind of trying to bring that point back into indie movie making. I think that's something that we need as indie movie filmmakers to focus on is our characters.
Yes.
These characters, that's the thing. You at the finite, you could have the coolest story in the world. You could have the most interesting themes and topics and situations for your characters going. But if your character's boring, the person watching is going to turn off your film because they're not having fun. They're not enjoying the characters. They're not relating to them, and so they're going to get bored and turn it off. That's just how it is. And I think that's why I did not enjoy watching The Hunt 2, was because there was no character in that movie I cared for. I never watched that movie and was like, oh man, that guy died. I really liked him. And that that's I feel like we did that well with Rotten Apple that will be coming out. Is you give time for the audience to know the characters, know their personality, relate to them. I think my character in the film is going to be kind of like the audience's view in a way, where it's like, because he's the voice of reason, he's the most sane, it feels like.
He's the innocent one.
Yes, he cares about, I want to, not to give away too much of the film, but I want to go see my family.
Yes.
I want to go, I want to live a normal life outside of bank robbery. I think that is nice for an audience because they can see that, they can relate to that, other than characters like Rafe's character, for example. I won't get into that for the sake of not spoiling, but I think that's something we need to keep in mind, is like, write interesting characters at the heart of the project, and I think the story comes with that. Yes.
And your character, it just occurred to me, is very similar story-wise in the situation of Ponyboy in The Outsiders, where the whole story is kind of him revealing himself to want to be like these guys, the greasers, and be part of the brawls and all of this gang violence stuff. But that's not who he is. He wants to be like that, but that's not who he is. That's the whole point of the line, "Stay gold, Ponyboys," because you're innocent. You shouldn't be like us.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the situation that, can I say your character's name?
Yeah, good.
Mr. Peach. That Mr. Peach is in in the movie is he is in that situation where he's in a world he really doesn't belong in,
Mm-hmm.
and he's dealing with those consequences.
I think with I won't get too into the movie. There are deaths. I feel like that's fine to say.
Yeah.
There are deaths, and I feel like my character reacts to those deaths in a way where you can tell this isn't a guy who wanted to go in and see people die. He didn't want to
Yes.
go in and go through a situation like this, and that's not how the situation was advertised to him. And I think that it adds a lot to my character. And I think with Rotten Apple it's very interesting because I feel like you have that realization of the deeper meaning behind characters for a lot of the characters in Rotten Apple. Not trying to like self-glaze the film, but I do think that there are a lot of good and interesting characters in Rotten
Yes.
Apple. And I think that like I think that's what helps the film a lot is because that film is a character film. It's very character based.
It all takes place in the same house.
Yes.
It's the same group of people that you meet immediately.
You already are
with a
familiar.
punch. Exactly.
You're already familiar with the situation, so you
Yes.
don't need to know the situation more. You need to know the characters more.
Yeah, and the movie is definitely a story that is taking place inside of another story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story taking place after a bank robbery.
Yeah.
It's so you can imagine you don't need to exactly see the bank robbery to know things went sour. I mean, the whole idea of the bank robbery going sour has happened to billions.
Sour like a lemon.
Get it? Is that a rotten apple reference? But that idea of the robbery going sour and the characters having to flee has been done tons of times throughout movies. Like Heat is an incredibly good example of that fight scene of them fighting through the city, fighting all of the police is literally one of the best action things I've ever seen. But Heat and Reservoir Dogs, which is the movie that Rotten Apple is really based on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very similar movie in the way, even with the character names. How in Reservoir Dogs, it's all they're named after colors: Mr. Blonde, Mr. White, Mr. Pink, and all of that stuff. Whereas in this, it's fruits.
Yeah,
that's why it's called the Rotten Apple. But that's really interesting, is telling that story in a story that you already know about.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing it back to the whole audience isn't stupid thing, like you were saying, is we know what's going on. We just want to see the story. And that's another good example of that would be Marvel Studios' Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't do an origin story for him because you already know the story. They just immediately did a Spider-Man movie, and that was good. That's what was good about it.
Mm-hmm. I think that, like you said, that Spider-Man movie, I love that they did that. It's very captivating as the audience. You're like, okay, I know who Spider-Man is. Tell me what's different about this one. Mm-hmm. And that's where you get the Spider-Man, that trilogy of Spider-Man movies. And I think those movies are great. I love those movies. Those are like one of my favorite things to come from Marvel in a while, are those movies. And it's just been it's great when a big studio like that actually delivers on a story instead of just what they think an audience needs to know. Mm-hmm. But kind of switching topics as we are getting later in the episode.
Nope.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Wayfinder, or the Wayfinder, sorry. Oh, yeah. Because I believe this was your first project, like big project that you mainly directed, correct?
I am about a secondary director type thing. I was heavily involved in the writing and production of the movie. Yeah, every time Kale's in it, I'm the one that's recording.
Gotcha. So I just wanted to know, what's it like? Because as far as I know, you're not. I mean, you are in the movie, but you're not really in the movie.
Yeah.
So
wink, wink.
Yeah. But I just want to know. Tell me your kind of experience with that. What it's like to be more on the production side with the Bananay movies, as we kind of talked about it earlier, but really getting in detail of like. okay, what is this like with this group of people? How is it translating? How are you getting your creativity into the movie?
Mhm.
How are you making it your own, if you will? And just kind of tell me about that.
The Wayfinder was another example of one of those movies where it was recycled ideas. I
Hmm.
had this old movie idea called Vishnu, just based on the Oppenheimer quote, where he's quoting the Bhagavad Gita and Vishnu and all that. But uh, it was a bunch of hunters going into Asia that's been taken over by monsters. It's similar to the movie Monsters,
Hmm.
except they're there to map out the place and try and kill them.
Yeah.
And there was this specific vibe of the movie that I wanted to drive home, the feeling of loneliness. And that was a real challenge to try and put onto film for The Wayfinder. I think what Cale Vance did, a large part of that is his cinematography, because I wasn't there that day that we did those initial scenes of filming.
Yeah.
That's all about the loneliness and stuff of Earth. But I edited those scenes together.
Yes.
And I edited them in a specific way where they matched up with the music of a creator who's freaking awesome, by the way. His
Hmm.
name's Repulsive. He makes horror music, and all of it's free. And it's
Awesome.
really freaking good music, too. So I used a lot of his stuff, and I'm absolutely going to be crediting him, and I'm probably going to be sending him an email saying, like, can I use your stuff specifically
Definitely send
to
me
him?
definitely send me a link so I can put them in the description here.
Yeah, he's really good with that stuff. And I included a lot of his music in the movie and lined up the clips with the drops of the music and all of
Yeah.
that. But it's interesting being on that side, trying to capture the different moods and elements you want to capture with the camera, because oftentimes you have to cut away to different recurring motifs and images in
Hmm.
order to really get at that idea. One of the motifs that I've been really going back to throughout this movie is the image of dead tree branches pointing up to a dark gray sky.
Hmm.
That image I've used a lot, and it has really helped contributing to that mood. And just seeing things that clearly haven't been touched in a long time.
Hmm.
I made this really short thing that also lined up with a bunch of Repulsive music that was supposed to be me practicing trying to get those moods,
Hmm.
where it's just me going around my backyard, cutting to different angles of things
Yeah.
on a dark, cloudy, rainy day. And that really gave me an insight on how all of that works,
Hmm.
especially with the motifs of abandonment and the creepiness of, jagged branches going up to the sky, dead branches on the ground, dried leaves, dead grass, a random human object that hasn't been touched in a long time sitting amongst nature and all of that.
Yeah.
It was really interesting trying to capture that in the Wayfinder, and also trying to make things creepy in the
Hmm.
movie with Buddy. If I'm
Oh,
allowed to mention that on the movie
I
on
mean,
the
it's
podcast,
your movie. Like,
Buddy,
go nuts.
I had to build a monster costume for the movie, and that was a challenge. I spent a lot of time on that thing, and it turned out really well. I was the one that was playing the monster, so unfortunately, I'm not behind the camera during the monster scenes, which I actually really wanted to do.
Hmm.
But in order to pilot the monster costume, you have to know how to walk in stilts.
Yes.
I learned to walk in stilts, and I can now walk in stilts, and that's pretty cool for the movie. If you've ever seen the Spirit Walker
Hmm.
costume, I largely based the monster costume off of that.
Yeah, I could tell with seeing it.
With the front arms being crutches and the
Hmm.
back legs being the peg stilts and all that. I largely based it off of that, and it took a while to really learn how to move in it
Hmm.
unnaturally, like make it look like I'm an actual monster
Yeah.
in the thing, not a dude piloting a costume.
For
But
sure.
uh, that was a challenge, and that leads into another thing: is that I can't get perfect at that. I
Hmm.
can't be perfect at moving like a monster in this costume I built, which is why I'm hoping to refilm most of the monster scenes because they include the monster moving.
Yeah.
And it moving, standing still, the things looks freaking terrifying.
Yeah.
It is grotesque, bloody, all of this stuff when it's standing still. But when it starts moving, it's a dude in a suit.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we can make it almost like a It Follows or a Michael Myers type of presence where it's always there, just watching,
Mm-hmm.
but it never really shows up. It never really moves on the camera to give it any indication that this thing's a living being.
Yeah.
Other than off camera, it's following you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm really hoping is most of the times you see it, is it's going to be off in the tree line just staring at the main character, and then the cue music and all of that for the monster. The only times you actually see it moving are from its point of view.
Yeah.
And that leads into another element of indie filmmaking that I think gets talked about a bunch and doesn't at the same time, and that is getting around things budget-wise. You can't make a monster nearly as good as something like Hollywood can.
Yeah.
But what you can do is make its presence more intimidating by it just always being there.
Yeah.
It's always doing something, but you never see it do that thing. And that's something that's a workaround that indie filmmakers have to do all the time, especially in monster movies and lower budget monster movies, is that kind of thing where you're not really seeing it do much because its intimidation and its presence is the fear factor.
Yeah.
Every time the characters, it's a dramatic irony. It is dramatic irony, where the audience knows something the character doesn't.
Yes.
The character can only see it do this, but the audience knows, oh, it's doing more. It's doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And that really gets seen in a lot of horror media. Specifically, Hitchcock does that incredibly well with the shot of somebody seeing something and then something shows up behind them. That dramatic irony really, when done in indie filmmaking and just filmmaking in general makes everything a whole lot better and a whole lot more interesting and scarier in that sense.
I for sure, I think the main constraint you have with a monster especially is it's much harder to do crazy after effects. You can't I mean, I'm sure you could learn it, but it's probably expensive and difficult to do CGI with a monster, and so and incredibly hard to make look good. So it's a lot with indie filmmaking. You have to learn so much of, okay, I can't do this exactly how a Hollywood studio would do it. How can I do it in a way that still is as interesting but different? And I think that's part of the beauty of indie filmmaking is you have to find the workaround to those problems. You can't just throw more money at it, like you were saying earlier. And it really brings out the most creative indie filmmakers, I feel like. The limitations is what makes indie filmmaking incredible, because without a limitation of budget, you'd just be like, well, of course they could do that. They have that big budget.
You need to invest yourself in the story, in the characters, because when you boil that down, that's the most important part of a story is the characters and what they're doing. And with indie filmmakers, with big budget movies and large Hollywood stuff, if you don't have any of those really well, like if you don't have good characters, you don't have an interesting story, their solutions always throw money at it, add spectacle, and adding spectacle is what a lot of those large Hollywood movies do now. Whereas with indie filmmaking, you have a bit of an issue because if your characters and all of that suck, your movie sucks. There's no redeeming quality to it. So it's really important to focus on character, story, all of the most important elements, because you have nothing spectacle-wise that you can really back it up with.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we are coming about to the hour mark, it's been a great episode, great topics. Obviously, I wish I could talk to you more about other stuff we have going on, but we could sit here and talk about indie movies for hours upon end. So, we can only talk about so much, and I'd love to have you back for another episode in the future at some point. Great talking with you.
Great talking with you too.
Is there anything you would like to kind of bring home with Bananay or any projects coming up you'd like to mention? Anything like that before we go?
Well, ending it off, I'd probably say everything we've said, all the complaints like, oh, this could be better, we need to work on this, all of it is to say that it is getting better. Obvious, The Hunt 2, as much as we can say like, oh, this and this and this, was one of the better was probably the best movie that we'd made up to that point, with The Hunt arguably being better.
Yeah.
And Dead End came out, and we were talking about its stuff and all of its flaws, but it's probably the best movie that had come out to that point. And all of that's opinion based, but I do feel like production wise, things have only gotten better, and I hope they only will get better.
Yeah, for sure. I think with every Bananay movie I see, the acting gets better, the production gets better, the editing gets better, and same with L&L movies. I think The Demon That Danced by My Side, the one that came out today, it's the best film that we've gotten out of our indie film group.
Yeah.
And it still has its flaws, but it's still the best we can do right now. And as long as we keep doing the best we can do right now, the films will only increase in budget, in skill, in everything. So, yeah, great. If you have an indie film you want to make, go out there and film it. That's the best advice I can give.
You'll only get better if you just do it.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for coming on to the episode.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
For sure.
Had a lot of fun.
I'll link Bananay, obviously, in the description down below if you guys want to check out their movies, and as well as our movies down in the description below. And hopefully I can get the music artist link Leo was talking about as well. Anybody mentioned in the video, please go check them out, support them 100%. And yeah, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for coming on.
Alrighty, thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'll see you guys in the next episode of L&L Takes. Peace out.